Morning, Lightmeister here, aka Kimball. I realized as I was going over the last video that there was quite a few of my stories from Saudi Arabia I missed, so I originally planned to do a two-parter, but we'll add a three-parter with some of the additional stories. Some of this is going to be rather down the tech side, so you may want to fast forward parts of it. So when I was going out there, I knew I was going to be doing these video segments, and I had the raw video files, but at that time, it's not like now you can just very easily pick up video editing software that'll spit out an MPEG-4. It's really easy to find and very inexpensive. At the time, the video player that I was using in the theme park was only did MPEG-2s. And the most economic way I searching around could find to be able to generate the MPEG-2s, I had to add in a peripheral card into my computer made out of a company out of France. Well, that means I got to have a full-size computer with me. And so I started looking around and picked up what's called a lunchbox computer. It's a mid-sized computer tower that has a part that folds down that has the keyboard and a monitor all built into one. Real slick way to be able to have more peripheral additions to it. Again, this is before USB. They still make these, but they're not as prevalent because of the miniaturization of technology. So I got in this computer, got that card pin there. I also put in a high-end sound card to be able to help with the generation of the audio files I was going to have to create for the different sound effects and whatnot. The power in America is 60 hertz, 110 single phase out of the wall. Most of Europe, it's 50 hertz. In Saudi Arabia, it's 60 hertz, but 220 single phase out of the wall. So you have to have a transformer to run American standard equipment. And so we picked up a couple of transformers while I was there. And one evening I was going to go to do some work on my computer and asked my dad to hand me the transformer. And it's not like Americanized electrical equipment, especially on something like that, where there's an input and output. There's no possible way to get it wrong. It's just a raw transformer that you plug in your wiring one side or the other to plug in. So he handed me the transformer. I didn't even look at it, assuming he'd been using it, was wired correctly. Plugged my computer in, plugged it into the wall. Well, instead of stepping down from 220 to 110, it was wired backwards. Stepped it from 220 to 440, and I blew out all the capacitors in the power supply. And that thing never smelt right again. And obviously, it was a custom-built power supply to fit in that case, so I had to go to a computer shop, just get any power supply they had and run it externally with wires everywhere. It was a mess, but yeah, it worked. Because of the abuse I'd done to that computer, I didn't get much life of it after the project was done. Now, Jeddah's layout as a city is very interesting. Trying to figure out how the best phrase is to piss off the least amount of people. Western culture, we built these cities over hundreds of years and grew into this concept of how civilization should work. If you've ever seen Lawrence of Arabia, 100 years ago, Saudi Arabia was a bunch of independent tribes that were constantly fighting each other and very nomadic. They really hadn't built much for cities. British come in, they want to be able to start doing oil. Plus, before that, want the help of the Arabics during World War I, I believe it was. And so they were able to convince these tribal leaders to start creating a kingdom, and actually get kings and all that. And then they started pumping oil. They had agreements with them, and suddenly these people are very affluent and want to create cities much like how the Western world works. The problem is they didn't grow into the concepts of Western civilization. They just paid for it. And then for each of these major cities, they paid engineers from major cultures throughout the world to design these cities. So Jeddah was designed by Italians. And so it's these giant city blocks, which it's laid out in squares. That part works really great with these giant roundabouts. I'm talking the scope of these roundabouts. Like they have art pieces, but again, they can't have engraving images. So one of the art pieces was a tugboat up on stands, and I mean that's how big these roundabouts are, to have multiple lanes going around sculptures and boats and whatever they deem to put there in that center part there. And then once you go down these blocks, because they're Italian designers, you got the main road going down with a frontage road and then a parking road in front of that. And it says you're driving down, you see the shop you want to go to. Well, you now got to go all the way around the block to get into the smaller parking road to park in front of the shop you want to be at. Different way of approaching it as an American, kind of an annoyance. The other annoyance was when you got to an intersection with a stoplight. The stoplight was on the side that you parked on. So if you're in the front car, you can't barely see the light. Now everybody else behind you knows this, and so when the light changes, they honk the horn. But it's not like India where it's time to go. No, they lay on that horn until they're halfway through the intersection. Very, very aggressive driving styles. Down the major freeways, it's very, very common to get passed by, you're doing the speed limit, maybe 5 over, and you're getting passed by somebody doing 80 or 90 in a BMW or Mercedes in the dirt to your right. Because it is right-handed drive like America, so they're way off in the median in the dirt, passing you, doing 80, 90 miles an hour. Happens all the time. It's very aggressive drivers there. Anyway, one time we'd gone down to the big bazaar there, which is just as you would expect in the Middle East, a bunch of shops and actual shops, and then tented shops where you can just buy pretty much anything. You can haggle for it. One day we went down there and we went to an actual rug shop. Figured we're in Saudi Arabia, might as well get some Persian rugs and make sure we actually got actual Persian rugs and send them home. My dad still has his. Mine's wrapped up somewhere because my current house, my wife felt it didn't match the decor. But I also picked her up a full burqa and a hijab and headband for myself, just because. One of the other oddities with the people we were working with, and I don't know if this is generally across the Middle East, more of a Pakistani thing or commonplace in Saudi Arabia or just Arabic in general, I don't know. But it was very, very common that we'd bought power tools like drills and whatnot that had ends on them. We bought extension cords. We had outlets put into the building we're working into. And it was very, very common for these construction workers to cut the ends off the power, the plug-in off the cable, strip it to wire, and have a small spool of wire, two-line wire, no ground, and just twist the lines together real quick, run the spool out to your outlet, and stick the wires right into the outlet. Very, very, very common. And more than once did one of us get lit up by not knowing there was a raw end sitting right there. And this is all 220 too. Finally, we had to start showing these guys we have our own tools that have ends. We have extension cords. If anybody cuts an end off a tool, you're fired. If anybody pulls in raw wire, you're fired. Use the extension cords. We have them. We don't want to get lit up. I mean, while we were welding all this rebar, to go quicker, usually when you're welding, you have a clamp that you put on the metal to create the electrical connection. That's how the welding works. It uses electrical current to molten the metal to fuse it. To be able to go faster, because we're doing this whole big section rather than a clamp, our workers had cut the clamp off one of the welders, actually eventually all the welders, and welded on just a rounded piece of rebar, so that when they're doing a section of welding, they just hook the rebar onto the rebar that's already there, and it makes a circuit. It's not a great circuit, but it works enough for welding. And their favorite thing to do is, if my dad wasn't paying attention and he's leaning against the rebar, was to place the hook on one side of my dad and weld on the other side of my dad and light him up a little bit. Yeah, they thought that was hilarious. Haha. Let's see. One of the other things the construction guys did, which kind of drove us nuts, not at the very beginning, I get it in the beginning, where they do the style of cement mixing where you bring in your cement mix, drop on the floor, make a bowl out of the center of it, throw in some water, mix it right there, and then use your cement. The problem is, as we were building things out, there'd be little cement bowls everywhere, constantly being built, and we finally had to tell these guys, we have wheelbarrows. You want to do cement this style, fine, do it outside, scoop it in the wheelbarrow and bring it in. We're tired of standing and stuff. And we just had to educate these guys at a certain point, you take that stuff outside, keep your work environment clean. uh, when I was back in America for my first trip back, while I was here, they painted the inside roof of the building. Well, actually, the inside, not just primarily the roof, but also the upper walls. It's a dark ride, called that for a reason. So you always do it black, and then add in where you want light and color around that. To save a little bit of money, they used automotive paint. I don't know why that would save money, but that's what they did. So I can't. And if you ever dealt with automotive paint, that's cast off just becomes this black dust that gets over everything. So I came back and everything was just a black, nasty mess. Thankfully, none of my gear had been put in yet, but the room to use for the control room, I was always getting black gunk on my hands. And then my last trip out was very interesting. I needed to go back to do some of the final programming, the final interfacing with the animatronic, and my visa had expired. So the effects shop in LA was still helping us a little bit, even though they dropped the contract. So I'd sent my visa to LA, and one of the guys took it to the consulate to get it stamped to allow me to go back in. And then I flew from where I live in Southwest Utah into LA. I was supposed to meet the guy at LAX, pick up my passport, go check into my flight. Now, this is before you could check in on the internet, and I'm on British Air. And if you're not checked into an international flight at least 2 hours before your flight, you run a serious risk of your seat being given up. There's that much demand. So my plane lands, but it was 20 minutes late, and the guy with my passport's not there. So I start calling everybody I can think of. It's a Saturday afternoon. I'm calling everybody in Hollywood, calling Saudi Arabia. We finally get a hold of his wife. His wife gets a hold of him. Turns out he's halfway down the 101 freeway. Plane was late, so he left. So he turns around, comes back, I get my passport, and by the time I get checked on the flight, it's an hour and a half to the flight. They've given up my seat. So I get bumped on to the next flight a couple hours later. The bonus side there, the company had been flying me 12 hours into London each way on coach. And I got bumped to business, which is essentially flying on a lazy boy. Much more comfortable, but I had missed my connecting flight in London. And because of summertime pilgrimage to the holy sites, British Air overbooks their flights into Saudi Arabia, specifically Jeddah, by usually 50 seats per flight. So I find out my flight's gone. I can try the next day, and I go looking for the cheapest place I can, because the exchange rate at that time was 1.6 US to the British pound, and I wasn't expecting to be there, and I wasn't prepared for the exchange rate. And I was told the cheapest place to stay is an area called Earl's Court. And they've got a bunch of these buildings which are basically turned into bed and breakfasts that will give you your own room with your own bathroom and continental breakfast, toast, jam, reconstituted orange juice. And that's pretty much what you're getting. And so I took the underground to Earl's Court, found a place, spent the night. Next morning, had breakfast, go back to the airport to see about getting on a flight, and then we're overbooked by 50 people. You're not getting any flights today. You can try again tomorrow, but we're still overbooked by 50 people. And I ended up spending a week in London, and every day I would, after going to the airport, and by half of the week they just start laughing as soon as they saw me, because they knew I was coming and knew what the answer was. I would wander around London, just see what's there, and then go try and find a cheaper place in Earl's Court to stay. Eventually, the cheapest place I found was £25, which was essentially a walk-in closet with a single bed and a 12-inch black and white TV, but I did have my own bathroom. And I had to call the guys in Saudi and say, I wasn't prepared for this being here. I wasn't prepared for this exchange rate. I'm going broke. You got to get me a flight out of here. Plus, I'm running out of time. So I finally did pay for a flight a week after being stuck in London to get me into Saudi from London. One of the cool things, one of the last days I was wandering around, I wound up down this dead end area. It was a wrap around in the inside of a building. It was weird the way the street was laid out. And as I was walking back out, I just happened to look to my side, and there was this plaque on the wall. Chopin stayed here the night before his last concert. It was cool little stuff like that all through London. Being a theater guy, I wanted to see at least one show while I was there. I didn't know how I was going to be there, so I finally decided I could pay for one show, just had to play it safe. And it came down between Forbidden Broadway, which, if you're not familiar with that show, is hilarious, where they take the songs of all the major, I don't know if they still make it now, but 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they take the songs from all the major shows and made fun of them. And just fun the way they did it. But instead, I went and saw Miss Saigon. They were closing out after a 12-year run, and yeah, a spectacle like that you can't miss. Afternoon show, it was only a handful of us in there, and I was up on the balcony. It was an amazing performance. Anyway, I finally get into Saudi, and I've only got a day and a half to finish up what I got to do before I got to get back because of my contract picking up at my theater and shows I had to start doing there. And so I basically pulled a 24 hours of programming trying to get things done and got tied up as much as I could. And then like literally rushing to get to the airport and getting there and running right onto the airplane. Again, pre-9/11. And just cutting it as fine as we could to get as much time as I could working because I'd wasted so much time in London. I figured coming out there would have plenty of time. And yeah, that's what happens on some of these projects. Anyway. Hopefully I've hit all my major stories. I'll see if I remember any others, but that should be about it. Again, very strange time, very strange. But there's times in life you just got to take these opportunities as they come up because you never know when they'll happen again, if they'll ever happen again. I greatly doubt I'll ever be invited back to Saudi, though they have opened up for non-Islamic tourists now. I find it ironic that the advertisement I saw had a hot woman in a bathing suit, since everybody I saw were wearing burqas. But hey, who am I? Anyway, with that, have a good day.